I am telling you today, as a public school teacher, to beware of the educational industrial complex because it is expansive, it is huge, and it's really not in your best interest.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Home Education Today. My guest is Ted Lamb, and he has some incredible information for us today to talk about his experience as a public school teacher and now going into the private sector as the director of a new school. He is a 25-year public school teacher from Suffolk, Virginia. He has taught on 3 continents, including South Korea, as an English as a second language teacher, and he has 2 children that he homeschooled during all this time. And he's in special ed, has a master's in K through 12 special ed, and just all kinds of valuable experience. So Ted, welcome to our program here, and excited to hear all of all the information you can give our listeners. And the question I wanted to ask you today to get you started, because you and I can go in many different directions, is why are you starting a school, having been a school teacher for your whole career?
Because the public school system has failed. That's just a flat out plain system statement, and I can explain that out. But I think first, for people to understand what do I mean by that, I have to start with the example. I'm also a history teacher. My undergraduate is to teach American history, and I love history of all kinds. So what many parents would, and even society in general, gets confused about is, I don't even know where to begin when it comes to public education. So let me define it for everyone first. President Eisenhower, hero of World War II, he helped end the Korean War. He rose among the highest ranks of the military, and when he was walking out the door, so he knows something about war and military. And as he's walking out the door, as his going away speech as president of the United States, he tells the citizens to beware of the military industrial complex. Now, I would think that he would know something about what he's talking about. I am telling you today, as a public school teacher, to beware of the educational industrial complex because it is expansive, it is huge, and it's really not in your best interest. And so with that, how did I get to wanting to open my own school? Okay. What people are trying, well, what people understand is what's necessarily in front of them. We don't necessarily always see the tentacles behind everything. So we have a lot of moms, and we have a lot of people stepping forward to be candidates, political candidates, and I understand that, and I applaud that. Being one myself and winning twice, it's a huge undertaking.
Right. I forgot to mention you served for 2 terms on a school board as well.
I served 2 terms as a school board member, and I can understand why George Washington said 2 terms is enough. I mean, even at the local level, I can understand it. I could have won that 3rd term, but 2 terms was enough. What people need to understand, and you're hearing this now, and it's a good discussion dialogue, and that is, well, we just got to wipe out these school boards and replace them new with, people that wants to. And no, it's not that simple.
No,
because the tentacles of the federal government with regards to policy that they have and laws, but the policy side of it is what's killing us, that they put into practice, and then the state policies and laws that is put in place.
Right. So Ted, it even goes deeper than that, right? Because really all of the federal standards are based on global standards. There's a global, we talked about this before, there's a global testing system or testing standards that all the countries get to beat each other up over or brag about or whatever. I mean, there's rankings. You see these rankings. You know, when you read articles about education, you see, well, the United States has been, you know, flat since the 1970s or the 1990s in math and reading. And, you know, compared to Sweden and compared to, they're worse than North Korea, you know, and all kinds of, you know, whatever they say.
Mm-hmm.
Which means that we're not being even controlled by our own federal government, really. Our education policy is coming from some global something out there.
Right.
Is it the UN? I mean, where do these testing standards come from?
So actually, we're being guided by fear.
Right.
Nothing more, nothing less. Fear. And here's why. I do buy into the argument somewhat that because because we have to go back and we have to look at and see what changed in the 1830s that started this long, colossal, you know, storm to happen.
Yeah, what hatched this monster, right? This baby monster that's just grown bigger and bigger.
And so, you know, we can ask the question about why aren't we doing as well as South Korea and so forth. But I can ask a counter question and say, how is it that we have created the world that we know it with our technology and so forth, and they haven't? If their system is so much better, then how come they haven't matched to the standard of living of ourselves? Right. And here's why. So you had, as you pointed out, in the 70s, we started playing with things, but we started seeing things weren't necessarily correct. So we started playing around with reading instruction and then math instruction. And then, you know, a part of this goes to the 50s when the Russians beat us to the moon. So now we're panicking and we're saying that, oh, there's got to be something wrong with our science and, you know, all of these different things. Notice also too, when we took prayer and Bible reading out, and that basically was the icing on the cake of a lot of philosophies and things that were being pushed for the previous 75 years. Okay, to me, I think there's some valid arguments that then you started seeing a downfall. Well, in 1980, 82, 83, there was this report that came out from a you know, war hero, documented, Admiral Rickover. And he published his findings that he did, and it was called A Nation at Risk. Anyone can look it up. And basically the summary of it said that if we had allowed a foreign nation do to us what is happening in education today, then we would declare war. And his premise, he was basing this a lot off those test scores and everything that you're talking about. Here's the problem with it. Living in South Korea for 4 years, their education system is based upon rote memorization. Rote memorization, okay? Yeah. All right, I mean, you go all the way back to Confucius and Buddhism, and I mean, it's all rote memorization. Nothing wrong with that. It's worked for them. But what we decided to do was we decided to now try to compare ourselves and act as though we're them. In other words, we decided to play baseball like everyone else, but we brought a soccer ball with us. So basically what we took, everything that made us great, okay, and we chunked it to become more in line with this over here. So of course we're not going to do as well per se, because we're trying to play a game that's not our game.
Yeah.
When you think about it, then if you follow the money, you mentioned about the standardized test. Well, Pearson is a major testing company that creates these standardized tests. At one time, it was to the tune of $1.3 billion from the United States alone. So of course, the federal government, of course, Pearson is going to want these tests to be played into. The bigger question is not only that 1.3 billion per year, we have spent trillions of dollars on education and we have gotten nowhere. The results are getting worse.
Yeah. And exponentially so since COVID. It's just taking such a nosedive that I was just talking to another teacher who's now a librarian in a group where I'm here this weekend, and she's just, people are just, parents are crazy, kids are crazy, teachers are crazy. It's just the whole, when you say the system is broken, of course, I agree with you. I thought it was broken quite some time ago, but it's just flat. People can't see how flat out in dirt, face in the dirt it is right now. I don't understand what it's going to take.
The problem is now is that it was broken before. It is crumbling now.
Yeah.
If you want to save public education, which I'm not so sure if it can be, but if you want to save it, then I believe you have to gut it down to its studs.
The studs, right. Replace the plumbing, replace the electrical. Everything. Yeah. And get all the dry rot out.
Yeah, everything. So what happened with me was about 10 years ago, I started noticing students, and of course I'm in an alternative school, so some would argue, well, though, of course you see this because it's your kids. No, this is happening everywhere in every school. But 10 years ago, I started noticing students were getting incrementally worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And not only getting worse, but their resiliency skills. And I know that may be a taboo term, but let me explain. The resiliency skills were getting worse, meaning these kids are willing to fly and jump and fight, if you just say something to them that they just couldn't handle. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, there are things that's in play there that has nothing to do with school, but school is having to deal with it as well. That these kids bring stuff in from their communities and whatnot. So on top of that, and then seeing things like the ability to be able to reason and think wasn't there. And then the standards are being lowered. Case in point, any of your listeners, go and ask for the grading system. There's things in place now where teachers cannot give a 0 if a child doesn't do an assignment. They have to give the lowest grade of whatever is assigned.
Right.
We think that we're doing kids a service to that. We are not. We're lying to parents. That's actually fudging graduation rate numbers if you really stop and you think about it. And we're not doing that kid a service at all. But it's a lowering of standards. So I'm seeing that. I'm seeing the fact that there is no right and wrong, but there is a right and wrong. And what I mean by that is there's no absolute. It's relative. You want to go by this pronoun, so be it. You want to, you don't want to wait in line, as
you want to lie to your parents. You want to be one person at school and another person at home, and lie to your parents. Okay, and as teachers, we'll help you.
Right, exactly. So with all of this, I just got to a point after I studied out different education models and so forth. I found one, which is Lamb's Christian Academy is the school that I will be opening. It's eventually going to be a K-12 school. We are on long-term basis. So when you hear this, think of this, I'm giving you short-term and long-term plans, but this will be a virtual as well as in-person school that is going to be emphasizing getting back to creating a biblical worldview, education off the biblical principles. It's the principled approach. So instead of every state has their own state mandated test that everyone has to take at the end of the year. They're called different things. Again, mandated by the federal government as well. So we teach knowledge, kind of going back to like how the world does, rote memorization, but we don't teach the principles behind things.
Yeah, but why?
the why, and we're seeing that now.
Yeah.
You're seeing that across the board. You're seeing that in the fields of engineering and medicine and just all technology, computers. We don't understand the principles, and so Lance Christian Academy gets back to principles. We are unashamedly to say that it is Christian. At the same time, we're also going to be bringing in a vocational, career and technical component to this
Nice.
as well. I believe that this is kind of hard to say too, and and let me apologize to everyone. I know that first impressions goes a long ways. I'm really not a quack, as I
You're not a quack.
as I say some of this, but I think what you're seeing too now is parents are saying, man, you learn what at a 4-year university that I helped pay for? And you also have students that saying, I don't want the $125,000 debt. And for what? What am I getting out of this?
Right.
And so we also are going to be working with the vocational training communities that's out there. Studying, we're going to look at what are the fields nationally that we're in need of, looking at the statewide here as well. And then we're going to garner curriculum using the principled approach in the curriculum to actually then bring out that career or that vocational training component as well. So we're looking at some things that we're really excited about to bring in. My goal is, because I've seen enough and I know enough, that's not right. My goal is that there's 56 million students in the United States. I want to see as many of them head out of the public school system as possible.
Right. We talked, that's what we talked about that before, about that's my goal too. Let's get as many kids into actual education as we can, out of schooling and into actual education. They're going to use in their life, and that's going to enrich their life. And one of the reasons we didn't really talk about why it's so hard to break the stranglehold monopoly that the government has on education is because of the teachers unions. That's a whole nother subject we haven't really, I mean, I've addressed that before in some of my videos and blogs and stuff, that there's no political will. You have too much money going into political campaigns from the local level all the way on up to the federal. Mm-hmm. And then you have money coming in, like from Pearson and other entities that make money off of the school system. There's no way you're going to be able to undo all that and fight that kind of power, that the money that they have in the political roots that they have in our system. I mean, there's just no will to do it. And the only answer to break this monopoly is to come out of it and create our own independent systems on local levels.
That is correct.
Only way to do it. Return the power to the parents is the only way to do it.
That is correct. And that sets up its own set of mountains and hills as well.
Yes.
And keep in mind too that even with what's happened so far, there's some states, like for example, I found out last week, New York, that they're not going to let us just go out.
Right. I know.
They're going to try and pass stuff that's going to make it very, very difficult. Mm-hmm. The question comes down to where is your line in the sand?
Yeah. What sacrifices are you willing to make, and what are you willing to put up with from your governments?
Yeah,
well, in Oregon, and I live in Oregon. In Oregon, they're not going to stand for it. And in Oregon, they just passed a state law that anybody of color doesn't have to. They can't flunk anybody of color. It's a law now.
Right. And
white people have to do school, but this is helping the people in the marginalized community. It's helping them.
Well, no,
I don't
well, no,
understand what they're thinking.
I'll tell you exactly what they're thinking. And here's the thing, and the sooner that we figure this out and call it for what it is, the better on we can get this war over with. And I'm saying war, not necessarily shooting, but I'm just saying under this war of ideas and yes, and so forth. They basically want our system, our institutions, our form of government, a republic. They want it to crumble and fall. That's exactly what they want.
There's no other explanation.
There's not. I mean, look, you also in Oregon have a law to where that you say that a 15-year-old can decide to have their gender changed through sex change surgery. It's also to that if a parent tries to stop that, then
You lose custody.
you lose custody of your child. Okay. If you go to the CRT playbook, the benchmarks, they've got like 5 or 6 of them. One of those is intersectionality, which says that the belief that you can do and say and believe what you want, pronoun wise, sex wise. There's also this component in there that says that racism is built in across the board. Okay, so it has to be done away with. I mean, language like that. What do you? I mean, there's nothing more but to call it what it is. They want
the CRT.
to do away with.
The whole CRT thing is none of it's logical. There's no logic to any of it at all. I mean, if you're going to crumble the system, but then they still want all the benefits of the system. And if you're going to, the only conclusion you can come to with the CRT is that if you're going to call every single thing that a white person has ever done or been involved in as racist, then it has to be done away with, which means all white people have to be done away with.
Well, and or demeaned and put into a different status. When you look at the tenets of CRT, really all they are is really when you go back, it's the tenets of Karl Marx and Engels of the Communist Manifesto. They figured out, well, no, those after them figured out that they took a hard look at our nation in the 60s with all of the race riots and everything. And they figured out, they said, oh, wait a minute, in America, the class system, the haves and the have-nots, the rich and that's not going to work. So they switched this to then turn it into race.
The race.
And so, so since,
they're still hitting the haves and the have-nots. They haven't abandoned it. But really, the Achilles heel is the race issue. That's the Achilles heel.
Right. They haven't abandoned it because it is part of, it's part of Communist Manifesto. It's part of doing away with. But for the United States, though, we don't use that argument. What we do is use the race argument, and that is what happened. So you've got the unholy alliance is the CRT, and the LGBTQA plus community has formed this alliance, which their allies, their tools that they use are the labor unions, and now even the federal government. I had professional development this year over Title IX, which is supposed to protect young women from sexual harassment and allow you to be able to compete in sports. Clearly, right in that professional development, it said that gender identity is now protected. So you want to be an it, or you want to be a they, a we. That's bipolarism. But if you want to be the opposite gender pronoun, you can. That is policy. Title IX. That affects schools. That is what's going on.
And girls' sports is going to go away.
It is going to go away because it's going to be defined as something else. But that is really, I mean, I think the sooner that parents figures out what is happening and what's going on, and that you're really not getting an education, the sooner we're going to be, and you're going to see this watershed. Now, what I do think, though, what's going to happen is we have to build in, and I love our conversations that we even had off the camera a little bit of some structures. because I see this coming too, and I've been arguing with homeschool co-ops and private school organizations of get ready, get ready, get ready, but everyone is still thinking in 1950s and not 2022.
Right.
And that is that what are we going to do when you do have a massive walkout? What are we going to do when you have parents that comes and says, I want what's best for my child, but I have to work? Or
Yes.
what are we going to do when they say, yes, please take my kid. I can't afford, though, a full,
Exactly.
And so we have to put our minds together with that. Hence, with Lamb's Christian Academy, we're kind of already looking at that even now, because we're going to have to, Christian schools, homeschoolers, and these families that are serious about getting their children educated, we have to form these alliances to make this a reality for everyone.
Agreed.
If you see it, I want your child. And you know what the beauty about this is, and may I be so bold even to bring faith into this too. The beauty of this is that we're talking since the 1830s. So all of us has been trained in this whole dogma, if you will. What's to say that even with this, that you will see more families coming to Christ off of this? If we do this correctly, we could actually turn around and change our society and turn it back from what is actually occurring at this point.
Well, and let's hope that, I'm all for that. I want to see the church do some tightening up of its own.
They're going to have to.
Of its own, doctrine.
Yes, they're going to
get back to the basics. The church needs to get back to the basics too.
Yep, they need to quit taking all of that grant money that they're getting from the federal government for their after-school programs, which when they do, then they have to buy into all of the stuff. Make no mistake about it. Hence, that's why you're seeing churches doing what they're doing, and we got to get back to the gospel of Jesus Christ. It's that simple.
It's that simple.
I love it when people say things like Christians are homophobic. Christians hate X, Y, and Z. No, Christians follow the teachings of Christ, which Christ says, if you love me, you obey my commandments. And his commandment was love one another.
Right. Love God and love one another. Yeah. And we don't need CRT to teach us how to love our neighbor.
No.
If we follow the dictates of our doctrine, we don't need anything else.
No. And I don't need to agree with your lifestyle in order to say that I can't love you. I can still love you.
Right. And I don't know how you feel about this, but even for people who have not come to Christ yet, come on down. We still want you to have, most people who in some of these communities have never had a great experience with it.
Right.
Come have a great experience with it and actually make a choice.
Right. Yep. Exactly. And that's the beauty about our academy too. I think what we're going to find is, and I've already had parents that I know, I know where they are with things, and they're still saying, no, I want my kids in because I want my kids educated to be able to think.
Right.
And that's the door opening right there.
Right.
As well. I love it. The church prays for a revival. Well, who's to say that COVID-19 wasn't it?
Wasn't the revival? Yeah, the beginnings of the revival.
Yeah, for the whole thing of prying open the can to open Pandora's box. Yeah. Who's to say?
Right. Well, and I just our platform, of course, is about educational freedom across the board.
Yep.
If you have a secular group of kids, families, okay, let's let you form your own educational thing. We still have resources for you. Of course, we want people to come to Christ, but if they don't want to come to Christ, nobody's forcing anybody to do that. Let's just give people their educational freedom. Let's just break the stranglehold.
That's right.
And give kids a decent chance at life, and not so they're not so indoctrinated with the oppressed paradigm that they can't function. I mean, there can be no other there can be no other agenda when you adopt that sort of a paradigm than to destroy our country. And we've talked about
agree.
my opinion that it's a three-pronged attack. The LGBTQ destroys the church, right? The CRT destroys our law, and the climate change destroys capitalism because it's designed to control industry and all of our lives that way. And they all intersect, right? There's the real intersectionality.
It is absolutely, and I love that example because actually all three of those things forms the American Republic.
Right. There you go.
My kids and I, we had a whole conversation about 2 weeks ago over socialism, capitalism, and communism. And what most people don't know, everyone associates, let's see, it was Adam Smith, The Invisible Hand. I think it was Adam Smith. He wrote The Invisible Hand, but he had also written a work before, and the name, I forget the name, but in that he talks about very much spiritual principles in that work in order for capitalism to work. But we don't talk about that. Same thing with John Locke. Everyone talks about, he's the great political philosopher, and they associate his name with separation of church and state. But people don't understand that he was actually a theologian first. And, he also wrote a work before the Second Treatise of Government.
Right. You're talking about the theory of moral sentiments.
That's it.
Yeah. I just couldn't remember it either, but that was going to drive me crazy until I looked it up. Yeah.
Yep. So, I mean, there's, and we can get there. And you're right. I believe in school choice. Heck, you want to educate your children to think that there's purple dinosaurs. I think that's your right as a parent.
Right.
I mean, I do.
Let's honor that first. Let's honor that first and let people get a taste of freedom again. Yeah, exactly. And responsibility, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I agree. Absolutely.
So have you finished your last day then in Virginia in school, and you're starting in the fall, right?
No. We go until June 17th.
Okay, so soon.
Yes, soon. And then I've got a lot of work to do, crafting lesson plans, but I pushed the envelope so far this year. I think I'm just going to knock it off the table next year with what I'm doing. And then we're going to open the academy we're on schedule to open September 2023.
Okay. So you're going to give yourself a year to really get this done right.
I'm going to give myself, yes. A year to get it done right and to do what I need to do in public school to finish off.
Yeah. Let me ask you how you are, what you did for real estate. This is a brick and mortar, obviously. So what are you doing for real estate?
So interesting you should ask that. So at this point in time, what we're doing is we're actually looking around. We would love to partner with a church. That's the most easiest thing to do. But if we have to go to the commercial side of things, we're willing to do that as well. Of course, we don't have billions of dollars to work with at this point. In fact, we're starting out. So, that has to take into consideration with any group or anyone that we start with. We have big plans. We think that we're going to be able to succeed. And our goal is that when if we work with a church or a developer, our goal is that when we walk into this relationship, if we ever have to walk out, maybe it's for growth or whatever, that we will have left the relationship far better than what we ever walked into.
Right. So, well, I'm after we end our interview here, we'll talk a little bit more about that because there's some interesting developments going on with that. But I'm very excited for you. And again, we're gonna talk. We're gonna have several interviews. We're gonna talk some more as things develop. And I want to talk to you more about, how you find teachers, how you really, drill down on that. One of the things that Candace and I talked about in our last interview, Candace Fish is to reference her, she's in Wichita, Kansas. Mm-hmm. And she's starting her own this fall too. She thought she was doing a micro school,
Uh-huh.
And then when she put out a little bit about it, she ended up with 92 students before she blinked twice. And her model is a little bit different. So I want to learn about her model is not, just doing school in a private sense.
Hmm.
It's a whole different kind of model. And she's bringing in, like you are, the industrial, what did you call it?
Yeah, the vocational career and technical.
Vocational. Yeah, the vocational training. Hers is more like a homeschool model at scaled.
Yes.
So I found that really interesting. There's just a lot of, very interesting. And this is what education should be.
Yes.
Education should be millions of experiments with the parents involved and saying, okay, this is what I'm looking for my kid, because these are the strengths and weaknesses of my child or my children, or this is the way I want them raised. This is what I want them to learn. And I'm going to go find the community school that fills that gap.
Yes.
This is what education should be. It should not be a one size fits all factory model that serves this little tiny segment of children who have grade level skills at a certain age in every subject.
Hmm.
That's not the way our brains develop.
Right. And if we would, and those of us that are what I'm, well, just came, the idea came to my mind right now. For those of us that are the true reformers of education here, I think we'd be smart to actually, instead of seeing each other as we're starting out here as competition, but actually start seeing each other as partners with regards to the ideas and so forth. Because I mean, she's in Wichita, Kansas. I'm not competing or anything, but we all can learn of what's working, what's not, so that we can put an end to this disastrous public education system as we see it.
Yeah, well, Ted, one of the biggest problems that we have in education is the teacher to student ratio, right? I mean, to address this idea of competition, really, ideally, we need to have a lot more adults in the system to really serve the needs of the children, right? When you get to a 1 to 25 ratio with maybe an aide, it's very hard to do any, I mean, right? I mean, ideally, right, you have a lot more adults in the system, which right now we have colleges shutting down their education departments because nobody wants to go into, tens of thousands of dollars into debt to be a teacher.
Right. And why should they?
Why should they? In a broken system. So
right.
we're having less. I mean, we're going to have to address that whole thing. If we're going to succeed if we're going to succeed, you and I as reformers, we have to address that too. We have to figure out a way to teach teachers not in college.
Right. Well, and
teachers.
And that's, yeah. And so that's also the other component too. I think you had said, and we can talk about this in an interview too, but yeah. So one of the things that I'm looking at as I'm looking as potential teachers and so forth is those that have already taught for years, and even those that's coming out. My question is, are you willing to change how you see education, and are you willing to change your craft?
Yes.
If the answer is yes, then I can work with that, because the principled approach to education is very different from what is out there. So so you have to change, you have to change that, the craft, if you will. When I did that this year, I saw tremendous results with behavioral students, high school. They wrote better. They won't admit it, but they actually talked better because of how I changed some things up here. So yeah, you're correct. This is going to have to be a fundamental shift. In fact, your foundation is going to have to be completely different than that foundation over there. You just can't put up a sign on the door that says, blankety blank Christian Academy or school, and you still do the same foundational things that they do and think to have different results. It's not going to work.
Not going to work. And like, for one person that I interviewed a while back, I don't know if you know Teacher Tom, he has a blog, anyway, he's not a religious guy, but he had one daughter and started helping in her preschool. There was there, and he's in, I like to say Massachusetts. He's back east, New Hampshire. I don't know, somewhere back, can't remember now. But anyway, it's all play based. In the elementary, up through third grade, there's the school that he had his daughter in was strictly play based, and they just have extensive opportunities for exploration for children. For instance, I mean, this is just a for instance, another model,
Right.
and he became a professional educator on the job. He just
Right.
stuck with it until he became a teacher. And,
Right.
his story to me was very inspirational. I thought, yeah, I taught my children, I didn't have a college education. And when I started, I had 5 children. I was pregnant with my 6th. And by the time my baby was 6, he was already reading and doing, much higher math than 6-year-old. And I never taught him a thing. I never
Right.
taught him to read. And in the 2 above him, barely anything. They simply, through constant exposure and being read to and just having a lot of education in the home, they just learned it. And then I barely did anything with them after the age of 12, period. And they're all college educated. So there's a whole nother level of understanding that teachers coming out of the system need to be taught. And people that want to be professional educators in a private system can learn really simply, especially if they begin with kids as they're younger and go up through some sort of training that's
Yes, and so that's
like that.
definitely that's definitely going to be part of our mantra too. The professional development, the training is going to be on the principled approach to where everyone is familiar with this, from the office staff all the way up. We're going to be talking the same language. But getting with what you're saying about teachers, I've always held, I know a couple people that I would hire as a teacher for the academy that's not even teachers at all. Because why? They're gifted and they're passionate about the area that they would be in. And that's a lot of it too, right there.
Yeah, that's a whole bunch of it.
So yeah, but I mean, there's so much. I mean, look,
there's so much we can talk about.
I mean, we're gonna have to find people. Then we're gonna have to do the training. Then we gotta have to figure out the economic resources for these parents, and also, there's just so much. I mean,
yeah, but we can do it.
So much.
But we can do it. We're up for it.
Absolutely.
I'm dedicating the next 30 years of my life to this.
You know what? I am too. I mean, I'm walking out of a career after 20. Well, I mean, I've been teaching 25 years, but as far as what the retirement system says, it's coming up on year 19 or something. I'll just take what got paid in and I'll put it in my own stuff, and then, bye.
Go forward.
I probably could probably get a better rate of return anyway with my stuff than, but
absolutely.
But neither here nor there. The problem is, I can't continue to, in a system, to promote, to encourage, to teach wrong, or to, as things are developing as they are, I am not going to, in essence, come down to lie, to children. And so I can't do it. I won't.
That's your line in the sand.
Yes. So, but I think we've seen a lot the last 2 years. I mean, we've seen parents rise up and so forth, but I can tell your listeners, you still have no idea what is going on out there. What you see now is bad enough. If you actually knew even more.
And how do we, that is that's really the big, question. How do we get parents to really open their eyes and their minds and say, I'd see it? Do we have to take hidden cameras? I mean, you got libs of TikTok telling us straight up what they're doing. And we think, oh, that's a fringe. That's not happening for my kid. That's not going on in my school. It's going on in every single school. It's going on everywhere.
Right. And let me say this, because I hear that too. And when we had the turnover here in Virginia of governor, lieutenant governor, and attorney general. So those parents that say that, you can always respond to this, because this is how it happens in education. We seem to self-create ourselves, if you will. So just because it's not going on in your school today, it will be tomorrow on two levels. For one, basically in Virginia, it was like, oh, CRT. No, this is something new. No, we're not going to allow it. No, and my argument was, no, this has been going on in California, Oregon, and Washington for the past 20,
years.
30 years.
Yeah.
With this stuff. It's now coming here. Don't say that this is new. It's not. Call it for what it is. Stop it at the doorstep. The problem also too, so for parents saying it's not in my school, well, no, it's coming, because if it started in Oregon, it will be in Tennessee before long. Right. And if it's not because some teacher group is pushing it or the labor unions, it'll be mandated by federal law. Again, Title IX right now, Title IX, which is policy, not law, says that every school across the United States, and just because your school's not doing it yet, but every school will accept and will not, as they define, discriminate against gender identity. It's there. It is in your school. It just hasn't, that lid just hasn't been popped off.
Right. So. And how do you, and it is, I mean,
right. So
I have in my book, I challenge parents. I say, if you don't think your children are being taught alternative sexualities, CRT, and global warming, that's, man-made global warming. Everybody knows man-made global warming is such an accepted thing now among everybody. Yeah, of course we cause pollution. Of course it's going to have an effect on the planet. Mm-hmm. That's not what they're talking about. Right. That's not what man-made global warming is about. Mm-hmm. That's not what it is. So I challenge parents to sit your kids down and say, do you believe this is a great country? Do you believe the founders were great men who sacrificed their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to establish this country? Do you believe Christopher Columbus was, inspired, and he was trying to find a new trade route? Do you believe that capitalism is? Just ask your kids these questions.
Right. Exactly.
Some of those questions they'll go, huh?
Right. And
a lot of them, they'll say, no, this is a racist country. And when you start hearing those answers, you'll know exactly where you and your children stand right now. There's a series of questions you just need to ask your kid. Is it fair? Are we a fair country?
And two other things that parents can do, like right tomorrow too, to kind of see what's going on. The first one is, if you want to know about if anything's being taught about with your children about sexuality and so forth, I would encourage each parent to go to their state Department of Education's website, right, and pull down what's called the curriculum frameworks.
Yes.
And usually the title is Family Life. I mean, it's called Family Life, or it could be called something else. And just read through the K through 12. It's broken down by grade of what each, is supposed to do. Another thing, if you want to know if CRT or any of this crazy stuff is around, go to your school division's website or put in a FOIA request to ask for, is there an administrative position called, something like diversity, equity, inclusion director or assistant superintendent.
Every single district has one.
If you have one, then you can best bet that there is professional development that's going on
Mhm.
with diversity and equity and inclusion in there.
Mhm.
It sounds great. Oh, it sounds like
I
wonderful
know,
stuff.
it's so
And,
kind.
but yes, it's this things behind in it. And unless parents actually knows the terminology and the definitions as originally intended, it's very
Yeah.
sneaky to try to
Also,
catch it.
also, yeah, and also, as you know, the social emotional learning, the SEL, is all been taken over by CRT
Yes,
everywhere.
unfortunately it has, because unfortunately, just like trauma informed practices,
Hmm.
same thing. It started out solid. I was an advocate for it. The science is there. It actually explains it, but it's been taken over by social
Hmm.
justice, restorative justice,
Right,
all of these things, just like
right.
SEL, and now it's turned into this monster.
Oppressed, oppressor, Marxist dogma.
Right,
Yeah,
exactly.
I have a whole chapter in one of my books about, please just go to your state educational guideline website. It'll be named whatever it is. Just Google, state educational guideline, Oregon, and something will come up. And read through, and here are some of the words you need to understand and what you're talking
Mhm.
about: equity, trauma, all this stuff. And beginning in kindergarten in Oregon, they are asking them to question their gender. In
Yeah.
kindergarten here in Oregon, they are telling children, you're not really what you think you are. You've been called that, but that's probably not what you are.
Right.
And they're trying to knock out all of the legs out from under these kids from the very beginning. And every single school in Oregon is doing this, and
Right. And
Washington and California and everywhere else.
that right there for me is grounds alone to yank your
That
kids
just
out.
that, just
Just
that.
that. But the one thing that I think did it, which in my mind, figuratively, I grabbed a bag of popcorn to watch the show, was when they decided to go after and call parents domestic terrorists.
Right.
When they did that, I knew
We
game
are
set
in,
match.
we're done. We're
Yep.
toast. We're toast.
Yeah, because
Well,
the mask came off
yes,
at that point,
it did.
because for many years we did so good of saying, oh, we want parent involvement, we want parent cooperation. No, they never did. And that right there was the mask off.
Yes, that's true. This has been a wonderful visit. We have
Yeah.
lots more to talk about, but I think we should probably wrap it up because we've been
Yep.
talking a long time. People get fatigued, and
Yep.
I'm not. I could sit here all day
Oh yeah.
and talk to you because there's a lot more ground to cover. So we'll make it another, I don't know, a couple months from now, and see where you are and how your school's coming along and how that's all developing. So,
Yep. And we'll
and
be in touch.
celebrate your last day.
Yes, and we'll be in touch with email also too, with
Absolutely.
a couple things. And as I told you before, and this is for anyone that's even listening as well, if there's anything I can do to be of service in any capacity at all, please feel free to reach out. If you don't mind, even to your listeners,
Yeah.
if you have questions over anything, or something's not right, and you just want to ask someone, you can. My number where I can be contacted is 757-372-6343. That
Wow.
sounds crazy, but I've had
That's
people reach out
brave.
from what you know what we live in dangerous times that calls for brave stances. And
Right.
so I've had people call me from, I don't even know who they are, just called from other states, just wanting to talk. So
Right.
that
Well, and let's
that
and
is
let's
out there for me.
let's put a plug in for your Facebook group. It's well, you say it's not yours, I guess, but you are very active, and you're an admin on there, right? It's
I
the
am an admin, yes.
yeah, it's the Conservative Teachers of America, and there
Yes.
are state chapters everywhere. I started joining some of the state chapters. I think there were 8 members in Oregon.
Yeah.
And there were, I think, 12 in Utah, and I think I bumped them up to 18 or something by inviting a bunch of friends in Utah that I
Right.
thought might be wanting to get in on that. And so I'm going to be working on Oregon here pretty soon and
Yes.
posting, and they've admitted me. I mean, maybe I'll even take over that page
Yeah.
because there's no activity going on that one. But
Right.
I know there's
So
plenty of conservative teachers.
So there is, it's the Conservative Teachers of America. That's the national page. And then from there, you can ask the question and so forth to get over to your state page. We're pretty accommodating of helping you get that. Also too, I don't know if I told you this either. Hey, look, I'm just a box of surprises. I'm also tied with the Parents' Rights and Education national nonprofit group. And we have the Parents' Rights and Education Virginia group. Anyone interested in looking at Lamb's Christian Academy, that's also a page on Facebook. Again, that's going to start popping more as we put more things up and letting people know where things are. But if anyone loves history, I have on Facebook History Moments with Ted, and that is 98% primary sources. And if you're really looking, I'll say it like this: if you're really looking for a social media group that hasn't lost its mind and can still have rational conversations over the controversial topics in history, then join us, because
Love that.
we're a great group. I mean, we've talked about some, we've made posts, and like I said, mostly primary sources, and for the most part, we've come close a couple times, but people hasn't lost their minds over.
That would be refreshing, because I don't know about you, but most of my other pages and stuff, it's a little bit of a bubble, and I like getting out of the bubble. I like talking to people with opposing views. I like having a rational civil discussion that's robust, and not getting into insults and labeling and stuff. It would be so nice to just have a conversation where people didn't lose their minds because you disagreed. I mean,
absolutely. And so the two groups, the Conservative Teachers of America, the Parents' Rights and Education as well, but the History Moments, all three of those. And again, I know there's people on those groups that we're not all of the same mind, but again, yeah. I think what you see is people that's tired of everything else and they just want to get somewhere.
Yeah, well, and we know, Ted, it's just going to keep going. It's that this train has started down the track, and it's left the station, and this is just going to barrel on down. We're not going to go back in this country to ever what we have been before. We have to rebuild. We have to dismantle and rebuild. And interestingly enough, that's what the other side is saying too. We have to dismantle and rebuild. Yes, we do. We're going to see what we rebuild, who wins the rebuild.
Yeah.
That's what it's coming down to. I mean, I don't want to be like, I'm not a doom and gloomer, but it's just obvious.
Yeah, no, I'm not a doom and gloomer either. I'm not a negative person, but I am a realist.
A realist, yes. I'm a realist.
I have a sense of humor. I love to have a good time. I try to see the positive in things. And sometimes seeing the positive in things is also being a realist. There's just no way of cutting out saying that there's anything positive about telling your kindergartner you needed to question your gender. There's nothing positive. That's the fact.
No, that's not going to go anywhere good, and nobody's going to win. Nobody's going to win.
No one's winning. No one's winning. And the fact is that is being pushed. That's not being homophobic. That's not being crazy or conspiracy, or what did they used to call it? QAnon or whatever. It's the fact that it is there. Someone said it. It happened.
Yeah. Well, my friend, we're going to wrap this up. We really are. I promise. We are.
Yeah.
Great to talk to you.
Like I said.
Yep. Great to talk to you. And we will visit some more later. Have a great day.
You too. Bye now.
All right. Bye-bye.